So I've been working on a video about Mormonism, but I figured it's time to do something less controversial and talk about AI audiobooks. Cheers. Hello and welcome back to my channel, and we'll be talking about something today that is a bit more rambly, so strap in and listen to me tell you a story. And we'll start with me having one of those rare opportunities to showcase a book. Yes, look, here's the book. I brought it. It's one of the few I own. It is, in fact, John Locke's collected writings on religion. Don't ask, I needed it for something. I didn't just want to hold it up because it looks pretty, because it doesn't. But I want to show you is, however, that it looks kind of dingy, doesn't it? You know, you look at the spine, it's been cracked in brutal ways. Yeah. It looks used, is my point, right? So, if I'd ask you, how many times do you think I've read this book? What would you say? Well, the answer is 0 times. Well, at least not physically. What I did was buy this book, and then I took a scanner and I scanned the entire text. And, you know, that means breaking this thing apart as much as possible. In fact, I know people who do, in fact, cut off the spine to scan every single page individually for an even better result. Now, the question is, why did I go to that length? Well, I wanted to put some voice actors out of a job, didn't I? Or maybe that's just a narrative that some people are spinning online right now. My point is, I needed this book, and it was obviously not available as an audiobook, because well, who needs to read John Locke's writings on religion? And that brings me to exactly what I did. I scanned it, I used the text, and then I used my screen reader, my text-to-speech software, to read the entire thing to me. And that's how I read this text. And this brings me to accessibility. See, accessibility is a bit of a problem. Now, those of you who have suffer from any chronic illness or have a disability may be aware of this. Accessibility sucks unless there's something else going on. See, text-to-speech is something that is getting more popular now because it's cheaper. Also, streamers have realized it's nice and so forth. Back in the day, the software that I used cost over $1,000 per year. Now, that's one part of this. See, accessibility, we do need sometimes stuff that is a bit... Well, the market's not very big. This changes whenever companies can sell the same technology, the same thing that a few people with disabilities, a few marginalized folks do need, when they can sell it to other people who want it or may want it. Case in point, audiobooks. Do you remember the 90s? Do you remember the 80s? Well, I don't remember the 80s that much because I'm not that old. But for a long time, audiobooks were not necessarily a thing. If you are blind or for other reasons require audiobooks, you could get some on tape, on cassette tape. A lot of them, at least in Europe, were actually narrated and read by volunteers because, and could only be borrowed from extensive or not so extensive libraries of audiobooks back in the time. Or you could get, in America, mostly where the market was there because you guys drive for hours and hours, you could get a bunch of audiobooks much earlier, once again, on tape. This changed in the early 2000s with the advent of digital music and digital audio in general. Suddenly, you could put an entire audiobook onto one CD full of MP3 files. Or, once the internet became a bit of a more accessible thing, you could just download the stuff. Or you could, on your iPod, or you could stream it once streaming became a thing. And this is when the market for audiobooks exploded, because suddenly everyone was like, well, I can listen to books while doing the laundry. I can listen to books while doing the dishes. I can listen to books while I'm on a treadmill. It's awesome. I can get books all the time. And the audiobook market exploded. That meant a much more, thousands more, tens of thousands more of books were suddenly available for the likes of me. And that's great. But it was not out of the goodness of their heart that any company did that. It was because suddenly there was a market for, non-marginalized folks, and we got to benefit from that at the same time. Now, this is obviously something that happens again and again. I just want this to, set the stage, because we need to talk about the next step here, and that is AI audiobooks. They are coming. They're no longer me scanning a John Locke book and having a text file read to me by a screen reader, but With voice synthesizers getting better and better, it's just a matter of time before someone will produce entire audiobooks narrated by a synthesized voice. The question is, how are they coming? Where are they coming? When are they coming? And why are they coming? And this is sort of what I want to talk to you about today in this long-ish ramble. And before we can get to the next big part here, we'll talk about history for a moment. We'll go back to the 19th century when a German Jew living in London offered the money of his best buddy, who made that money on the backs of workers in the textile industry that got exploited brutally, well, when that guy wrote a book, or a bunch of books. And he pointed out something really interesting. How capitalism works. See, if you want to produce something, you have to invest capital, you make something, you sell it on the market, you get money back, you make profits with that. Now, if you are a capitalist, there's two parts of investments that you need to make, and you have one goal. The goal is, of course, to make as much money as possible, to maximize profits. What you do is you invest in, well, resources and folks. These are two different parts of your capital. One is constant capital. You build machines, you buy your factory halls, all of that stuff. That's constant capital. And then you also have variable capital. That's the wages you pay to your workers. Now, one thing that is very clear here is, of course, that if you want to maximize your profits, and you can't just raise prices to high heavens because, there's competition and so forth, the way to make this as simple as possible, if you have constant capital plus variable capital equals, the price, well, if you want to make profits, you need to minimize variable capital because the constant capital, machines cost money. The investments are the same there. So if you pay your workers less or make them work more for less, you can make more product and you can make more money. And this is a process that has been going on forever and ever and ever. And basically, there's two ways of doing that. One is to find ways to pay less or fewer workers, and one is to pay those workers less money because they may not be as skilled. And what we learn about here is automation. Automation is the key here. See, if you have a skilled worker and they use a few tools and they create a product, you pay that skilled worker a lot of money because, they need sort of to get money back for getting training, all of that stuff. Skilled workers are expensive. And the tools they use are an extension of the human, of the worker. With automation, what happens is you find and you create machines that do all of that working. And remember, machines are constant capital. And those machines can ideally be used by less skilled people. So you don't need to hire a skilled person. You can hire just someone off the streets and you can pay them much less. And that puts, pressure on everyone who still needs a job because for some reason we need to, buy food, pay rent, all of that stuff. And that, puts the leverage firmly in the hands of the owners of the means of production, right? That's what happens with automation. What it also does is it turns around that relationship where earlier on you have a skilled worker and you have tools, and those tools are the extension of that human. After automation has been successful, you have machines, and unskilled humans are the extension of the machine. They just press a button or do whatever else they need to do, but the actual heavy lifting is done by humans. Now, it doesn't take too long to understand that this is something that the owners of the means of production, the capitalists, corporations, so forth, really want to do because their goal is to maximize profits. So automation is something that has been going on for a long time, all the way since the 17th century, possibly beyond that. In the early 19th century, a bunch of weavers had enough and smashed up some machines. You may have heard of them. They're called the Luddites. After that, unions have been fighting back against it for a long time, but us over here, who don't do the kind of physical factory jobs that were automated fairly early on, we often kind of did ignore that. This whole situation has come back big time, though, with something that is often called the AI revolution. Now, you may be aware of the fact that the title AI Revolution kind of sucks, is wrong, and so forth. There's a dozen videos out there. There's hundreds of texts out there. You have probably read them. Some of them were probably read by, written by machines. My point is, over the last 50, 60, 70 years, with digitization becoming more and more of a thing, digitalization becoming more of a thing here, a lot of jobs that were, considered white collar, sometimes maybe even creative, have been taken over by machines, because you don't need all these people anymore, and machines are cheaper. Once again, automation is happening. With AI, as, say, generative AI recently, however, this has come to the forefront. Now, I think there's one important aspect to be understood here, why this is the case. While we kind of ignored factory labor as being, laid off and so forth, and that's certainly something that we need to understand and own up to, that we've kind of ignored automation for a long time, this time it has come for people with voices. I mean, creatives. Creatives who, in a digital social media economy, have platforms where they can yell about their jobs being endangered. It's important. Don't get me wrong. They are right to do so. It just means that with ChatGPT, Midjourney, and other tools of that sort, suddenly everyone is aware again of this. Now, obviously, large corporations don't give a fuck about it. People on the political right don't give a fuck about it. Libertarians don't give a fuck about it. A lot of people don't care about it, but some of us do kind of think it's bad if creatives lose their jobs, because on the one hand, it may lead to a decrease in quality. It may also, just lead to people losing their jobs. And we still need to buy food and pay rent. So that's the climate of the AI revolution right now. We need to talk about two aspects of that before we can move forward to the whole idea of AI audiobooks. And that is the difference between theft and automation. See, with generative AI, especially the images and text generations and stuff like that, that is currently, everyone's favorite toy or a demon. A lot of theft took place because you have a machine, you have algorithms, you train those models on a ton of data, and you need to get that data from somewhere. Turns out, especially with text generation and image generation, apparently they took a lot of copyrighted material, which is what we call stealing, to create stuff out of that. And that is still sort of stealing with a lot of technology behind it. And that is highly problematic, to put it mildly. I mean, it's fucked up, and there's, in a just world, there would be some sort of recourse we can take against it. But right now, the theft is the important part that we need to talk about. The replacement, the automation, the replacement of skilled labor with computer algorithms is a secondary, well, not a secondary, but a second and separate part of the problem. And we need to keep those two parts separate when we talk about AI audiobooks. See, voice synthesizing is something we've done forever and ever and ever. Well, ever since we started playing around with computers, we wanted to give them voices. We wanted to make them say, "Stop, Dave, don't." We wanted to, hear what Stephen Hawking had to say. Computer voices have been around forever because we as humans like to talk, and when we start to deal with machines, we want the machines to talk as well. And the technology is highly complicated. And one part where the learning of what we may call generative AI or other forms of learning models come into play is not so much when it comes to creating the sounds. We've had, voices that create sounds, artificial voices, synthesized voices that create human speech for a long time. But where it becomes a bit of a problem is talking. See, talking requires more than just making sounds. It requires making silences. It requires what we may call cadence, what we may call rhythm, when to stop, when to slightly raise your voice, when you go, all of these things that make narrating, that make talking in a long form sound human, are incredibly difficult to create artificially. And that's where, artificial intelligence or learning models, machine learning, comes into place. You just give a computer model enough samples of speech, and it may start learning, how to recreate a more natural sounding, speech pattern. The important part here is that so far as I know, so far as most of us know, and this is what we need to go off, this has not been done by stealing. Now, could Amazon potentially do the thing and just take all their Audible audiobooks and run them through machine learning software? Yeah, of course they could. Right now, I don't know if that has happened. What I have seen is, in fact, speech labs doing exactly the thing you might want to do in this situation, which is pay click workers to read out sentences again and again and again in 1,000 combinations and create a large swath of just audio data that is not copyrighted to train your machines on. So when we talk about AI audiobooks, the theft part, that is such an important aspect of discourse when it comes to text generation, when it comes to image generation, for now, until it is shown that AI voices were in fact trained illegally or on illegally obtained copyrighted material, for as long as that is happening, we need to put the theft part of the discourse aside. We need to focus on the automation and thus taking away jobs part of the conversation. And I think that shifts the discourse a bit. Yes, there are human voices that have been obtained and that are used to, create artificial or synthetic audiobooks with voices that sound like actual living human beings, but for the most part, those have been obtained with consent. A large part of the strike of the Actors Guild last year was for voice actors, to want a say in whether, when they are hired to do something, whether their voices are taken away or not. And that, once again, that is an important part of the struggle that needs to be looked at. Because, don't sign away your voice unless you really want to, and so forth. And we will get into, the whole struggles between capitalists having the means of production, having the larger leverage and power, and that's why we need to unionize and so forth. It's a whole conversation that I don't want to get into today, but it is real. But for what I'm talking about today, right now, is voices that have been obtained legally, trained on copyright-free material to create audiobooks. And that stuff is coming, and there's very little we can do about it. See, it makes sense. It makes the production of audiobooks much cheaper. For a long time, it didn't happen because for a long time, these voices were not ready yet. In fact, until last year, for example, Audible absolutely made it illegal to upload audiobooks that were narrated by a synthetic voice. There's, articles you can look at when 2 years ago, a bunch of companies used AI voices to create audiobooks, uploaded them, they ran through the filter, Audible put them all off the platform again. Interestingly enough, a lot of these audiobooks were in fact non-fiction books. I think that shows once again where the difficulty lies, because non-fiction books require less of a dramatic performance than, say, a fiction audiobook, and are thus easier to produce with AI voices. This all has changed now, or in fact it has changed last year, when Audible announced that it will, open beta testing for KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, indie authors to create synthetic voice audiobooks through their system. And the usual thing happened. A lot of people started yelling on social media about how this is bad and how we should not support AI and so forth. This is the discourse I want to talk about, because I think there's some things happening here that are problematic, because the discourse is offloaded to people who are susceptible to this kind of discourse. It does not actually, it only causes harm to the people that are currently waging that discourse, and the group of people that will ultimately benefit the most from it can get away with it for free. See, I don't think it just happened accidentally that it opened this up to self-published authors, to indie authors. Large corporations, traditional publishers, mainstream publishers, the big five as they're often called, they will use AI voices sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. Whether they'll do it for their flagship products or just to push out lesser known works, I don't know, but it's just a matter of time for them to do it. And because of the current climate of the AI discourse, there will be a backlash. Now, what if we could actually front load that backlash, have that discourse happen where it doesn't hurt the big players, and then just slowly push it into the system if we want to? Wouldn't that be neat? And I think that's kind of what's happening. Now, obviously, I can't say if this is on purpose. I don't think, well, I mean, I think it's kind of on purpose, but maybe not. See, the indie publishing scene is what we need to talk about here for a moment. The indie publishing scene is, well, on the one hand, there's a bunch of, scammers doing all kinds of tricky shit. They don't care about legalities. They don't care about ethics or anything of the sorts. But there is one part that I would call the, well, indie community, whatever you want to call it, self-publishing indie community, the people that hang out and use hashtag writers of Twitter, writers of X, or whatever you want to use, these kind of folks that are proud, self-published indie authors. They form a community, and they are the community that is currently arguing about it, because these people care. Because for a lot of these people, being an indie author is not being a failed tradpub author, but is a choice. It comes with certain ideals in discourses why self-pub might be better or why self-pub is important. A lot of these arguments are often raised. One of these arguments is, of course, inclusivity. We all know that trad publishing, traditional publishing, is very white and is still very male. It's definitely very straight. And if you're a marginalized voice of any sort, you'll have a hard time getting a good deal or even getting heard. And the argument is that self-publishing has opened up the discourse, has allowed a lot of marginalized voices, people with disability, people of color, queer people, all of these people to have their voices heard, because they can just, click a bunch of buttons on KDP and have their book as a text, as an ebook, published by Kindle. And that's great. So that idea of inclusivity, that form of progress and progressiveness, if we want to call it that, because I think it should be self-evident that it's good to have more voices, but, that is part of the self-understanding, of the self-image of the indie community, of the indie publishing community. The other part is, of course, because it is a community, there's a lot of support happening within it. People share each other's work, people, lift each other up, people call each other out, and so forth. So if you are part of the indie writers community, being pushed out for something you do, because there obviously happens gatekeeping and self-policing in these kinds of communities, if you fall afoul of that and are pushed out, this has dire and severe consequences. And for the most part, I think that's good. You don't want to have, dickheads profit from your hard work, actually doing the things that we need to do on social media and so forth. You don't want that. I don't want that either. The problem is, with the current discussion on self-published audiobooks, with, AI voices, I think this is going slightly wrong. With the discourse being started the way it got started last year, when Amazon announced that they are using AI voices now, it became very clear that the indie publishing community, at least large parts of them, are not having that. They'll stand with their voice actor friends and so forth and make sure that only humans read books. And I think that's wrong. Now, hear me out. Paying people to read your audiobook is expensive. There is the audiobook creation exchange offered by Amazon that, allows you to select people, and it's all kind of built into that whole platform that is run by Amazon and lets you pick someone to narrate your indie published audiobook and upload it on Audible. And if you go through that exchange, you'll have to pay a lot of money for that. I don't know, $200 per hour. Maybe more, depending on what kind of author kind of narrator you pick. Maybe a bit less, but let's go with 2,000 for now. 200 for now. And let's say you have a 10-hour audiobook. That's $2,000 you pay up front to have an audiobook of your text. Now, those of you who ever try to, sell indie books may figure out that it's kind of difficult to make $2,000 back on Audible. And yeah, that's exactly the point the reason why so few indie published audiobooks exist, because it's expensive. Most of us just can't afford that. So these books remain text only. My point is that saying Audible, AI audiobooks will take work away from and jobs away and money away from voice actors does not actually work in this regard, because if you can't afford $2,000 to create your audiobook, you'll just not make it. So you're not spending those $2,000 on a €100, $100, $100 audiobook, AI audiobook, and take the remaining $1,900 to just get hammered or something. That's not what's happening. That's not the reality. So creating AI audiobooks as independents is not impacting the overall market, at least not significantly. But the discourse is happening now, and that's the point I wanted to talk about. See, we'll argue about this until we're done with it, and then slowly it'll just happen, because that's, how technology works, and slowly the stuff will happen. But once the big boys, the big five, the traditional publishers are moving into the marketplace with AI narrated audiobooks, yeah, the struggle has been done, and that's when the damage to voice actors is being done, not now. So right now, the indie sphere is fighting the fight, is doing the arguing, is potentially doing the damage, and is normalizing slowly, because normalization is what will happen, just realistically speaking, right? Is doing all the hard work so that the big players can just move in later on and avoid the backlash. And I think that's what I kind of want to focus on, why I think the discourse is currently somewhat harmful. And then I want to talk about, the last couple of points here, which is, right, is sort of a plea for intersectionality. See, yes, it's great to stand with voice actors. We need to do that. We need to do it at the right time and the right point, because right now what is happening is that we are taking the side of voice actors and their, job security, and we are weighing it against accessibility, once again. And accessibility in two directions. See, less audiobooks created means less people who require or rely on audiobooks can get them. Those include people like me who are blind. These may include people with severe dyslexia. These include people who have 3 jobs and just don't have the time to sit down and read text, because, let's face it, reading text with your eyes, whether it is on a cheap ebook or an expensive deluxe hardcover, it still requires you to have those hours to do nothing else but reading. Whereas listening to audiobooks is something you can do in your commute, you can do on the treadmill, you can do while you do, cleaning, doing chores at home. There's a lot of places where people can read, or in whatever way you want to appreciate stories that are just possible through audio. Right now, we're keeping these people from having access to a lot of voices, which means we're keeping those marginalized voices who can't get traditional publishing deals with audiobooks and so forth. We're keeping these voices on the margins yet again. And that, I think, is the problem. It's important to fight for the rights of voice actors, but it's also important to understand, or to make, those marginalized voices heard, to get them heard, to get them to the most possible people. And there's a way we can do all of that by intersecting these ideas, and not having that struggle, getting all the bad press, all the backlash out right now to the people who are already not making a lot of money with this, the people that are already doing this mostly out of passion, and reserving all the ire to when we need it, when we need to fight the big ones, when we need to fight the corporations. So the question is there a way to get out of this? And before we go there, just a quick point. This is very much a question of grades. See, I can technically get all these books as ebooks. And if they're not available as ebooks, I can buy physical copies, scan them, have, my shitty text-to-speech narrate them, read them to me, and so forth. That is possible. But that comes at a cost. There is a price to that. That price is, financially, I need to pay for my screen reading software. It is time, it is effort, and it is quality. Let's not face it. Listening to cheap text-to-speech read a 500-page novel sucks. And while you may call that comfort or whatever, it's one of those important aspects that we kind of ignore when it comes to accessibility and to disability and marginalization. We, as marginalized people, already have a higher energy cost when it comes to mental, physical, and so forth energy. We spend so much time because shit is constantly slightly harder that, yes, just clicking on Amazon, on Audible, on Script, or any other audiobook service, and just having the audiobook on our phone, being able to listen to it on our phone in that way, that saves so much energy and time, and therefore we can use for something else. And I think that counts for something. And I think it's important to mention that. On the other hand, yes, we need to make sure that audiobook narrators, humans who want to create audiobooks because they love doing that, because they, bring something to an audiobook by, their voice, their unique character, their unique performance, they should have a chance to do that. Which brings me to what can we do right now? Well, join the revolution, dismantle capitalism are, obviously the end goals here. In all seriousness, I think with the progress of automation that is inevitable and will happen in all fields, because that's just how the system that we have built for ourselves over the last centuries is, constructed. We seriously need to once again advocate for things like a universal basic income, because there will be more and more people out of jobs, because we don't need these people doing jobs. We can put them into bullshit jobs. We can do all these things where everyone gets paid basically minimum wage for unnecessary works, and we all suffer from that. Or we can look at solutions like a UBI and so forth. And that would allow people who want to, narrate audiobooks, tell stories, allow to, make a living and survive and do the other thing. Would it result in, a reduction of price? Maybe not, but it would possibly result in indie writers having a bit more disposable income that they can then use to pay for better quality audiobooks. We can do all of these things, but these are long-term things. The other part, I think, is allow or not castigate indie authors when they decide to try out this new technology for themselves to make their stories heard and make their stories and their voices accessible to a large group of people who would otherwise not have that access. And maybe just pledge, if you're an indie author, that once, if you make enough money to actually pay for a narrator, then just make a new version, which will be a better version. Do that, and I think that's the best we all can do. Make your works popular using AI technology and then pay the humans so art remains the human thing that it so fundamentally is at its core. These are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know your experiences. Have you even tried out the AI audiobook option on Kindle Direct Publishing yet? Will you? Would you? Are you a voice actor who are reading audiobooks, narrating audiobooks? What are your thoughts on the matter? Let's have a bit of a discussion about the whole thing and make it a positive one and reserve our ire for the big corporations that will do it no matter what, because they just, they have the power right now. And yeah, I don't know, save up on those bricks and balaclavas so once the revolution comes, we can actually, do something about it. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.